Hello, and thank you for joining us for Change Your Chats. I'm Grant Venable, Director of Change at Be the Change Volunteers. Today, we have one of our favorite guests returning to the show. Some know her as Debbie Poppins, some as Debbie Mom or Mama Debbie. In our office, she is the Executive Coordinator for Projects and the Chief Compassion Officer. Debbie Waggoner, welcome back to Change Your Chats.
Thank you, Grant.
So, Debbie, I want to go over first, I just want to go over your many titles, what they mean to you, and where did you get them? Can we start with Debbie Poppins? How did you get the name Debbie Poppins?
I am a chronic overpacker, and when we'd go on builds, they'd say, "Does anybody have any gloves?" I have extra. I just would have extra of everything, and so I think it was Farah started calling me Debbie Poppins, and then it just grew from there.
Yeah, it was Farah or Sadie Scott, one of those volunteers. I remember we were sitting on an early build in Malawi, and I thought the next thing you were going to pull out of your bag after the peanut butter M&Ms was going to be an umbrella or a lamp. But you just kept pulling things out and pulling things out. We played a game one night to see if we could guess what was in your bag.
They called it a pop off
A pop off,
between
right?
Sadie and me.
Okay, what about Debbie Mama or Debbie Mom? Because you get called that. I know you get called that in India, but you've been called that in other locations. Tell us about that.
Well, you're gonna make me cry first thing.
Let's get it out of the
Well, we
way.
were
You're a
in
crier.
the first build in India. Gulshan, who is well, he's an interpreter, and what else is Gulshan's
He's,
titles? He's
he's
got more
a
than one.
well, he's a professional contractor. And I've worked with Gulshan since before BTCV or before I was working with BTCV. He and I have been friends for a very, very long time, but he is also our official community partner in India. And so he helps us vet projects.
Well, he came to me the last night and told me that when he became a Christian, his family disowned him and would have nothing to do with him. And we talked for a while about it, and then finally he goes, "So I have no mother. Can I call you mom?" And it just took off from there. The
Yeah,
teachers were calling me mom, everybody.
that is
That's how I
definitely
got that one.
a deserved title because you do treat everyone as though they're your child, they're your relative. You treat people with a lot of love, which leads me to another title you have, Chief Compassion Officer. And that's one that was bestowed upon you by Jimmy and Christy Cook, our co-founders and the organization. Tell us about some of the things you do as the Chief Compassion Officer.
If someone is sick, one of our changers, and I send flowers and cards, and if anybody needs something, I try to fulfill that need.
Yeah, it's a critical thing because BTCV is so spread out across really the globe at this point. We've got supporters not just in the United States, but in Italy and in South Africa, Ireland, Australia now. We're kind of bound by high tech in terms of communication. And because of your effort and your work as the Chief Compassion Officer, you allow us to be a lot more high touch, which is critical and a big part of our mission to have relationships with people. And so we couldn't be more grateful to have you as the Chief Compassion Officer. You really fill a spot there that I'm personally not that great at. As you know, I'm a contractor, and so I don't always speak the language of compassion when it comes to projects and getting things done, but it's critically needed in our organization. I would say in every organization. The next, and this title is probably your most official. You are the Executive Coordinator for projects for BTCV. Tell us what you do as the Executive Coordinator.
I pick up mail. Have a lot of spreadsheets where I track donations. If like we have one person who donates a certain amount of money every month for a future build, so I keep track of that. If somebody had to cancel, I keep track of everybody's payments. And if you could see the table behind me, it's full of shirts and water bottles, and I'm getting those ready to pack up and ship out for Peru.
I just want to tell people if you have received a shirt and if you flew out of the correct airport, you can thank Debbie for that because she keeps everything in the cloud office, which is what we operate off of, very organized for us. And she has to dig into my sometimes very disorganized office and make sure that it's correct. So it's critical what you do as the executive coordinator of projects for BTCV as well. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Hey, Debbie, so a big reason that we wanted to interview you and bring you back to the show is because you recently returned from Macumba, Malawi, which is in southern Malawi, on your 30th BTCV project. And I wasn't going to ask you to list all 30, but you told me that you actually have a list. So we've got time. Tell us where you've been and how many times you've been there.
India and Puerto Rico, I've been 6 times each. Malawi and Peru, I've been 5 times each. Uganda, I've been 3 times. Rwanda, and I don't know if you want to say Tanzania or Tanzania. I've been 2 times each, and then to Papua New Guinea. In addition to those, I've been to Kansas City twice for book delivery, and which is not a build. And then I've been to India twice for site visits.
30 different projects, 30 participations with Be the Change volunteers. That's a serious milestone in the time that you've served with this organization. And we'll come back to your time in Malawi because I want to hear about your view of that project and your experience there. But let's just continue to talk about BTCV and your participation in general. Tell us what sparked your interest to start traveling with BTCV in the first place.
I was working or volunteering with another nonprofit, and we were going to Malawi with tubs and tubs of clothes and shoes. Go back the next year, never see them again.
The clothes and
And
shoes.
the founder of that asked me to meet with Jimmy and Christy about joining us to work on a library in Malawi. And so I met with Jimmy and Christy, and everything they said about education and building a school, and it just made sense. And I thought, this is what I need to do. I don't need to take tubs of clothes, and I need to go build a school.
And so you did. You went on the project to Malawi, and then you continued with BTCV. So tell us about that experience and maybe the first few experiences. What caused you to continue to do so many trips with this organization and to become so involved? Because I want listeners to know that with all those titles, especially the executive coordinator and chief compassion officer, those are not paid positions. Debbie's 100% volunteer. So why did you continue?
It was just the impact. When you see the impact it makes, going from 17% girls going to school to over 50% going to schools. When you saw the children here kids don't want to go to school. There they want to go to school. They want a gift. They don't want an iPod. They want an iPad. They want a tuition. They want school uniforms. They want books. It just made, and then you see a teacher rubbing the top of a desk and saying, with tears, saying, I have a desk. I'm going to feel like a teacher. You're
Yeah.
making a difference, not only in their lives, but in our lives.
Yeah, it's amazing with BTCV. There's a lot of wonderful, really great nonprofits and NGOs that people send money to that do awesome support projects all over the world. But with BTCV, donors have the option to go and participate and really touch the lives of the people that they're investing in. So that's awesome to hear your story about that. Debbie, speaking of stories, what do you see as the most challenging trip that you've been on? And did you feel like it was still worth it?
The most challenging was probably Papua New Guinea because
Papua
it
New Guinea
was
was
so
challenging.
far away,
How far is it?
so hot. I think we flew, actually, flight time was over 19 hours. And that
Wow.
did not include layovers and things like that. And we had to
That's just
spend
the
the
main
night in
flight?
Australia. Yes. And we had to spend the night in Australia. But it was hot and it rained every day and it was humid. But the people were great. I mean, they did the best they could to feed us well and house us well. But the conditions were not the best, but we made it.
So sometimes you got to go a really long way to do a lot. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Do you have a story about a time on a BTCP project when maybe things were going south And because you were traveling with BTCV, everything ended up working out.
In India, a couple of times. One time there was a transportation strike, and they were getting kind of violent with people who were out on the road. But
Yeah.
because of you and Gulshan, you convinced them to let us drive to the school without any repercussions.
Yeah,
And
that
I
was a unique
honestly,
situation. I remember that roadblock.
yeah. And then we had a time there where tuk-tuks took us to school, but didn't show up to take us home. So we got more tuk-tuks. The first tuk-tuk drivers came and wanted to beat up the second tuk, and you stood between me and the tuk-tuk drivers, and I felt very safe.
Well, I'm glad you felt safe. The tuk-tuk drivers definitely have their own way of doing things. But again, you're able to travel to these very remote locations where typically tourists just don't go to these places. And because you're with an organization like BTCV, you're traveling with some people who have some experience and local social capital that really helps us navigate challenging situations. On top of challenging locations, what is the most cush location that you've traveled to with BTCV?
Kind of a tie. Rwanda we had very nice rooms, and we were within walking distance to the school
Yeah.
this
Yep.
last time. And they were really, I had good food, had private bathrooms in our rooms. But in Peru is like living in a tree house because of the accommodations there. But
It's
it's hot.
glamping. Peru can be glamping, huh?
It really is.
It's important for BTCV to have these different levels of difficulty or challenge or comfort with projects because we want to have some entry level projects so that people who might be hesitant to go to a more challenging location would give this a try and would see with their own eyes and feel with their own hands the impact that their gifts can make on someone's life long term and really change not just a student's life, but an entire community's life. And so that's why, it's important to us to not just we're not just an adventure travel company, right? Not every trip we
Right.
have is rugged. If you're looking for adventure, we can provide you with that. But if you're looking to get your feet wet, we have that also. Debbie, on projects, we always say you don't have to have any construction experience. And in over a decade volunteering with BTCV on 30 different projects, you have done every kind of work imaginable. What kind of work is your favorite kind of work to do on a project?
Honestly, it's whatever I can do with the team, with members of the team. There are things that have to be done where you're more isolated, and I'll do that because that's still part of the team. But I do enjoy being out there with the team and taking pictures of everybody.
When you're on site, the community members, the students, there's a lot of locals around. Some of them are just coming to see what this group of Western travelers in their rural community is doing. Some of them are employed at the school, they're teachers, they're staff. Some of them are students and parents. What is your favorite way to interact with local people? Do you have any special stories about that?
Well, the one that I told about Gulshan being called mom, but like when we went to Malawi the other day, there were two teachers who remembered me from last year because I went to their classroom, I sat with them, I talked to them, and you can get past the language barrier. Sometimes that can be a problem, but
Hmm.
just making friends and keeping in touch with them. Met people and they somehow have internet and I keep in touch with them. So I have for me, lifelong friends.
Let's talk about language barrier because that is one thing that intimidates people about joining BTCV on these projects because the places we go, some of them are English medium or, a lot of people do speak English, but in some locations, there are very few people who speak English. What does BTCV do and what can a volunteer do to move beyond the language barriers?
Well, our community partner, from my experience, almost always speaks English, if not always, and they will interpret. You can usually find a student who knows English, and they're thrilled to help
Yeah, that's a good
interpret.
one.
Yeah. but like when we go to Peru or Puerto Rico, where they speak mostly Spanish, we have a team leader who speaks Spanish fluently. Have a couple of them.
Yeah.
So we have people who go and speak the language already.
Yeah, and that really helps us to bridge, those communication trials that we run into. So, Debbie, let's go back to Malawi because I want to make sure that we capture a volunteer's experience. This is our second classroom that we've done in Malawi. But just open up and tell us about the trip. And just do me a favor, start from where you flew from because it's a long way to Malawi also.
Well, it was crazy. We flew out of Columbia, but we flew back to St. Louis this time. So that was kind of crazy.
Out of
But
Columbia,
we
Missouri, yeah.
flew, we had to fly to Chicago and spend the night in Chicago and then get on another plane and flew to, oh man,
Was
we
it
had
Addis
like two or
Ababa,
three.
Ethiopia?
Yes. And then we flew on to Blantyre, Malawi. And then we got on a bus and rode the bus out to where we were going to stay. And then we unpacked. And then we went out to the school and went through. Some people had never been, some of us, it was our second trip. And we met people. I mean, they greeted us. I mean, you pull up and the kids come running to greet and yelling and greeting you. Um,
It's a
I
great
take a
experience.
I take a camping potty because I don't squat in a hole.
Yeah.
So we got that. But this year they built bathrooms. They had bathrooms that they built while we were gone,
Uh-huh.
and we still used it. But I mean, you're just the community there just comes in. The women, the work the women do is just unbelievable. I mean, they'll have a baby on their back and they're passing huge rocks or digging.
They're
The,
engaged.
the, they're very much. I mean, it was just unreal how then they would not like the way we were doing something, so they would take over and move us out of the way and laugh the whole time. But we had nice accommodations there.
Let's talk about
Um,
that. Tell us about where the team stays currently in Malawi.
in a wildlife refuge place. It's in a lodge. And one night, I had a roommate who's 24, and she goes, "There's an elephant outside our cabin." Like, there is not. Well, look out. There is a huge elephant right outside our cabin. Another night we had a wildebeest, and then another night we had a hippo. So you see all kinds of animals.
Wow.
And one thing, and this is not about where we're staying, but when you go, you are immersed in the culture. It's not like going on vacation. You get to know the people. You see how they live. You see their struggles. You see their success. So you're seeing the young people working at this lodge, having a job is just encouraging.
Yeah, and that's a newer, the land has been a national park for a long time, but the reintroduction of the big five into Malawi, which are the big five game animals that people travel from all over the world to see at different wildlife preserves, that's new, and that's been a huge thing for the Malawi economy. So it's really cool that we get to be part of that and see the success of that. So you've got pretty good accommodations in Malawi. I would say they're comparable to Peru. You've got a longer drive to the school because the preserve is a longer way from the school, which people have told me is still worth it because you get to see a lot on that drive every day. Um, what kind of projects were you guys doing while you were in Malawi? What was the work that you were doing?
We built finished up. They had started a classroom and we finished that. We got the roof on, the walls up. We did the girls were playing netball. That's what they called it. And it's broken down stick with a bent up hoop. We got them a new hoop and a new pole so they could have more fun playing netball. We had a soccer game. I don't think we won. I didn't play.
We don't typically win the
um,
team soccer game.
we had two special ed teachers with us who met with some kids with special needs and talked to the teachers about, and that they were so open and receptive to that,
Yeah, that's
which
a unique
you never
opportunity.
know what it's going to be like. Yeah. Mixed a lot of concrete, mixed a lot of concrete.
Yeah.
I didn't, but, and then again, they helped. I mean, the community worked with us on, we built two bridges.
Tell us about the bridges.
Okay, the bridges are made out of rock and concrete and mortar, and they're built so that when it's rainy, the kids can still get to school without having to go through water.
Yeah,
And
because they have a
it
high
diverts the
water,
water.
they have a high, what they call a rain season in Malawi, which causes high water in the wash and creek areas. Basically, we could see that it was up to 5 feet deep in some areas, which is higher than the height of a third grader that has to walk to school.
So they can't go to school when in the rainy season, a lot of them, because they walk a long way to get to
Right.
school.
Up to 7 kilometers is what we read in the application.
Yeah. Yeah. So there were two bridges a little ways apart. They dug them out. We built the ditches. We put culverts in, concrete culverts, which are, I mean, we had to roll them to the
Yep.
hole
Big
and
old
then
concrete
cover them with
tubes.
rock. Yeah. And so built two bridges like that. And that took the first, and we did it quickly. I mean, they said they wanted it done by Tuesday, and we just got there like Saturday night, and we got them done.
Yep. So on this project, you did two bridges, which created new access points to the school. We had already done one bridge the year before, so there's three new access points to the school. And you completed classroom number two. You felt like the community had a really high engagement level. Talk to me about the community on year one, and then the community on year two. After having done one project with us, what was the engagement like the second year in comparison?
A lot more. I mean, the women were there all day, every day, and still had to go home and take care of their families. And we got there the first year, they were clearing off the soccer field and they were working, but it just seemed like they were much more engaged in the work and in making relationships with us. I think
Yeah,
that was important as well. They wanted to be our friends and we wanted to be their friends. So we had a lot of laughter, but it was just much more engagement, I think.
that
I
is
think
so
they
great to hear.
trusted us more coming back.
Something I've been told, or something I was told early on that made a lot of sense to me is in some of these places, so many promises have been made by so many organizations, governments, you name it, that don't come to fruition, that there is no follow through on. And so someone told me a long time ago, Grant, they don't believe you're coming until you get off the plane. And I thought, well, that's nuts. We told them we're coming. And our culture is so different in that way. And so over the years at many projects, I've seen just what you're talking about, where the community starts to believe more and trust more. And really, our relationships are built on trust. These schools are built on trust. So I love to hear your point of view that the community engagement is already increasing there, because that's just going to translate to a year-round investment by that community in the school. Well, Debbie, thank you so much for joining us on Change Your Chats. Thank you for giving us some of your time on a Friday afternoon and for sharing your story. A huge thanks from everyone at BTCV for sending shirts, making sure they take off from the right airport, making sure donations are logged appropriately. You just do so much for this organization. In addition to that, you've traveled on 30 projects, giving your time, talent, and treasure to people who are deserving worldwide. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and thank you from the organization Be the Change Volunteers, Debbie.
Well, thank you because I've gotten so much more out of it than I've given.
If you like Change Your Chats, you can find more of them at www.btcv.us. You can show your financial support for BTCV by clicking on the donate button and helping us build more schools worldwide. Thanks, and be the change.